These 2 weeks have been a special time for me, and I hope that they've been a special time for all of you. We've been in that moment at the end of the secular year when, in this country, people might actually take a break, find a time to rest. For those of us who were here last week, we spoke about the challenges that we can face at this time of year, and this week we'll speak about the opportunities. First, let's talk about gifts, as in Hanukkah presents. My husband and I joke about the culture and meaning of gift giving in each of our own families. Giving Hanukkah gifts is not something we usually do in our observance of the holiday. So I was surprised when my husband, near the end of Hanukkah this year, gave me a gift at candlelighting time. It was a book called The Murmuring Deep by the Torah scholar Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg. This book was recommended to him by his cousin, and indeed it's an excellent read. I highly recommend. Building from there, let's talk about friends and family. This past week, I was in Philadelphia with my husband's family. The week before that, I was in Northern California with my family. For me, family is one of the most important things in my life, so this was a special treat. I know family isn't always the easiest all of the time, but for me, the special closeness in these relationships, the opportunities for getting to know and getting to be known, getting to understand and getting to be understood are so special. They open up space for conversations that can be meaningful and transformative in unique ways. So I'll tell you about a transformative conversation I had with friends and family on New Year's Eve. But first, I'll tell you about the gift I received about the book. So I didn't get a chance to start reading it 2 weeks ago when I was with family up north. I traveled by car. There was no audiobook version. Between spending time with my mom and my baby nephew, there wasn't a lot of downtime. So on the plane flight to Philadelphia, I was eager to dive in. My husband was eager to hear whether the book recommendation from his cousin panned out. As we're about to land, my husband asked, "So, is it any good?" I said, "It's great. It's so engaging. The only thing is, I've got to go back and read it when I have a Chumash with me, and I have Sefaria open so I can look up all the endnotes. It's so dense and scholarly, I want to get all I can out of it. But even so, even without those resources, it's been one of the most captivating books I've read in a while." And it was like, yay for Torah, yay for books, we're happy, very cool. So New Year's Eve, right? We're enjoying dinner all together, family and friends. At some point in the gathering, it hit me that I was kind of outnumbered, but not in a way that I expected or recognized at first. So we had at this gathering an English professor who's also a writer, a poet who's also a playwright, a dramaturg who's someone who works in the field of theater, also a professor of theater, and a screenwriter. Then there was me, the rabbi, and there was the doctor, a pediatrician at Children's Hospital. I found myself listening to this rich conversation about creativity and story. It was fascinating. I was trying to follow along, really enjoying myself, but I was way out of my wheelhouse. And it was funny because when I'm in my usual patterns of thinking and doing things, I see doctors and rabbis as dealing with essential facets of the human experience. But as I took in this discussion of creativity and story, my mind was open to different facets of the human experience, every bit as essential, if not more, that don't often cross my mind or desk. And this is the power of friends and family. When we connect and reconnect with people we don't always see, jumping into rich conversations that we're able to be open to, even as they are unfamiliar, we can encounter special moments of transformation, special moments of growth. So at a different point of the conversation, I was chatting one-on-one with a dramaturg. She was asking me how my work is going, what it's like for me to be a rabbi. And I spoke about how much, post-pandemic, technology is changing things. I was explaining, now for those of us who live in Los Angeles, this is extra applicable, how live streaming is changing people's experience of Shabbat. People can wake up in the morning, watch 1 or 2 sermons live streamed from the East Coast, go to shul, hear their rabbi's sermon, come home from shul, and watch another couple of sermons live streamed from a different shul that morning, also on the West Coast. This is a completely new experience of Shabbat. No one could have dreamed of this 6 years ago. These changes are happening at the speed of technology. Meanwhile, religion, historically, is very good at staying the same, changing not very much over time. But now, it's changing fast. It has to. There are worldwide studies being done on the present state and future trajectory of the rabbinate, the work of rabbis. There's one thing everyone agrees on, and that is things are changing so fast, and no one knows where we're going to end up. And what we spoke about next really blew my mind. The dramaturg responded, well, in the field of theater, we have a conversation going on about whether or not people even have the attention span for theater anymore. It's not necessarily realistic, she explained, for people to sit passively for a couple of hours and take in an experience when they're only looking at one piece of media at a time. They don't have agency about how the experience unfolds. They can't hit pause or repeat. They can't listen to it at 1.5 speed. They're expected to have their phones off and put away, and they're not actively interacting with the story. Maybe theater as we know it can't continue. We just can't listen the way we used to. Then she further blew my mind. She was explaining how sometimes, for example, in new streaming shows, the plot seems slowed down, simplified, a bit strange if you're used to older, pre-pandemic paces of storytelling. People in her field comment on this, and they explain it's due to double screening. Have you heard of double screening? It's the expectation that now, when people are streaming a show, they're not watching only one screen at a time. They have the show on the big screen, and they're on their phone at the same time. So storytellers are responding to this by spoon-feeding their viewers the plot of the story in small, repeated doses, so the audience can be sure to follow along. This is a new way of doing things brought on by double screening. I didn't know that that was a thing, but as soon as I heard about it, I understood from my own experiences teaching and speaking exactly what she was talking about. Mind doubly blown. We continued our conversation, and eventually she said, maybe theater can't continue the way it used to. Maybe religious services can't continue the way they used to. I'd never thought of that before. But one thing I already knew, of one thing I was already sure, the work of rabbis is changing fast, and no one knows where we're going to end up. Now back to the book, the Hanukkah gift for which there is no audiobook version. The Murmuring Deep by Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, a work both engaging and complex. It has a whole 30-page analysis of Joseph and his brothers, focusing on this week's Parasha Vayechi. And that 30-page analysis is kind of a part two. The part one is a 20-page analysis of Joseph, focusing on what happens to Joseph when and after he gets thrown into the pit. I was reading it and getting so much from it, and I really wished I could explain it to all of you today. The reality is there's a little bit too much there for this more brief format, so I'll give you a taste, and hopefully we'll have a chance to learn about it more together sometime. Parashat Vayechi, at the end of the book of Genesis, attempts like nowhere else in the Torah to wrap things up, to tie a bow on the story, to create closure. It's fascinating. We can see this visually in the text of our Sefer Torah. The calligraphy, the sofrut, writes the words and sentences in a format called satum, meaning closed, without breaks. But Rashi, the most well-known Torah commentator of all time, looks at this satum format and says, in Jacob's attempt to tie a bow on the story, in Joseph's attempt to wrap things up once and for all with his brothers, their pushing for closure actually leaves things unresolved. Rashi comments further and says, Jacob tries to provide prophecy to his children, giving them closure about the eventual outcome of their family's history, but instead, he ends up kind of wandering and speaking about other things. Now, after Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers say to one another, what if Joseph still hates us? But the Hebrew word they say, here translated what if, is everywhere else it appears in the Torah translated if only. It's as if the brothers are saying, if only Joseph would acknowledge with full honesty how deeply he has been hurt by his brothers, then perhaps things could be spoken about and fully resolved. Instead, Joseph responds to his brother's apology saying, don't worry, it's all in God's plan, brushing aside the opportunity for difficult conversation, creating closure without resolution. At the end of our parasha this week, at the end of Parashat Vayechi, at the end of Book of Genesis, we wrap things up neatly, but in doing so, we've left so much unresolved. We have closure, but not resolution. Zornberg's teaching is amazing stuff. It's so complicated, it's so rich, it's so nuanced. I hope we have a chance to learn more about it together sometime, and I hope that in the future, we continue as humankind to choose to put down our screens, our computers, tablets, phones, and don't forget the smartwatches, for long enough stretches of time that we can keep reading complicated books and speaking about complicated ideas. I don't want that to be lost to us. There was one other thing I was thinking about after my conversation with the dramaturg that honestly didn't even occur to me until well after the gathering that night was over. Jewish prayer isn't actually anything like theater. Okay, maybe Jewish prayer services are like theater in some ways, but Jewish prayer isn't actually anything like theater at all. Doing Jewish prayer at a Jewish prayer service is actually more like taking a yoga class or a meditation or martial arts class. If that isn't your thing, think about an art class or a language class. If you were to take a pottery class, for example, you'd expect to walk out of there having sat at one of those wheels, kind of making a mess, and with a delightful and personally crafted artifact to show for it. If you took a Hebrew class or a Spanish class, you'd expect to spend some of the time speaking Hebrew or Spanish, walking out of there knowing a couple of new phrases. When you're doing Jewish prayer, the idea is you're having an active personal experience. You're articulating the words of the prayers yourself, and if you don't know them, that's fine. That's why there's a rabbi and a cantor. You follow along carefully and say Amen at the end of each blessing, and that's what it looks like to be in the process of learning the words. And if you already know all the words, and you don't need a rabbi or a cantor, you're still going to need to do Jewish prayer in a group anyway, because the Kedusha during the Amidah, the Mourner's Kaddish, the most important prayers, require an individual to lead and a group to respond. So even if you know all the words and can have a personal experience individually without a leader, you still need to find a group and a leader to have an active personal experience of call and response, of leadership and following. Maybe a Jewish prayer service is sort of like watching a stage play or a cinematic film, but Jewish prayer itself is really more like taking a pottery class, where you don't really get the full experience unless you make a mess and walked out with an artifact. It's really more like taking a Spanish class, walking out with a few new phrases you can use in conversation with people you meet. It's a complicated world, and it's a new year. Even the most stable societal institutions, the ones we have counted on our whole lives, are going through unprecedented and sometimes frightening changes. I wish I had a simple answer for myself and for all of us about what to do to prepare for the future, but I don't. I don't know what we'll need for the times ahead. But here's my best guess. It's in two parts. First, we have to embrace change. Whether we like it or not, there's no going back, there's only going forward. And second, we have to be ready to engage with complexity. On the one hand, we need to be ready to use artificial intelligence to help us. On the other hand, we need to separate ourselves from our screens enough to be able to still focus on one thing at once, to be able to go into depth with historical analysis, academic scholarly analysis, to still be able to go into the subtlety of nuance so we can encounter the reality of human experience. We learned from this week's Torah portion that being a parent, a child, being a brother and having siblings, it's wonderful, but it's not easy. These essential human experiences of family can create pain and separation, but can also create connection and healing. We can't ever escape from the complexity of human experience, but we can do what's necessary in this new year to bring our full selves to meet it. Shabbat Shalom.